Monsters, and welcome to the Horror Files. I am your host, Live Dana, and on this podcast I dive into a particular horror movie each episode, providing insights and reviews as well as the latest in horror movie news. And first of all, I apologize for the sound. That is a train outside of my window. You may hear some occasional noise, so please try and disregard that. But we are doing a special episode because I went, like many of you, I'm sure, I went to the theater last weekend and saw the new Alien Romulus film by Fede Alvarez. And I wanted to talk about not only my thoughts about this film, but realizing kind of while I was watching the movie and after I had watched the movie, sort of the questions and emotions, thoughts that it posed. Maybe not the ones that it expected to, but it did nonetheless. And mostly regarding how Hollywood treats sequels, prequels, and sort of these legacy franchises. And now I know a lot of you went and saw the movie and enjoyed it, and that's great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I am. But I felt the need. I was going to do a completely different episode. I was going to do, I'm still doing my Summer of Scares series. I'm actually going to wrap that up next, for the final episode next week. And I was going to do it on the ruins, but honestly, after seeing this movie, I couldn't be bothered. I felt like this hit on something that I really felt the need to talk about. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
Are you sure you want to do this?
There she is.
You want to break in and steal highly regulated equipment.
This could be our only ticket out of here. Should be in and out in 30 minutes.
Welcome to the Romulus space station.
This place gives me the creeps.
What the hell is this?
I don't know.
What the fuck was that? Young?
Stop playing around, man. Just get up.
I'm not playing around. There's something in the water.
What do you mean there's something in the
I
water?
don't know. There's just something in the fucking water.
Run.
Are you alright?
Navarro! I don't know what to do.
Whatever comes, we'll face it together.
Let's go.
Impact event in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so the format for this is going to be a little bit different than my usual Horror Files episodes. And mostly because I really want it to be, I guess, more of a conversation and discussion format. So it's going to be a little bit more freewheeling. So just to warn you. And I'm going to say a lot of things I'm sure some of you guys won't like. And you know what? That's okay. You know, we can have differences of opinions on films. And that's what art does. That's what things that, you know, move us, things that, you know, irritate us. I mean, they make us feel something, whether it's good or bad, and everybody's going to be different about it. But I wanted to address it because this is something that, I mean, I personally, I love the Alien franchise, specifically Alien and Aliens, to be honest. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, but it just put me in mind of kind of this sort of cycle that I see sort of perpetuating a lot lately. And not just with horror films, but I think with like films in general for sequels and prequels and all that kind of stuff. So, but let's get into a little bit on Alien Romulus first. So, Alien Romulus, of course, came out this year, 2024, and it was directed by Fede Alvarez, who co-wrote the screenplay with Rodo Ceaseless. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. I'm sure a lot of you know Alvarez from his other films, such as the Evil Dead remake and Don't Breathe. The film was produced by Scott Free Productions and Brandywine Productions. It is the 9th installment in the Alien franchise, and it's set between the events of Alien 1979 and Aliens 1986. And the film stars Kaylee Spaney, David Johnson, Archie Renault, Isabella Merced, Spike Fearn, and Eileen Wu. So it's set roughly, I think, 20 years after Alien, which takes place in the year 2022, or 2122, sorry. And about 37 years before James Cameron's Aliens, which was set in 2179. So basically, Romulus reveals that the legendary Big Chap xenomorph, we see this at the very opening of the film, from Alien actually survived being blown out of the airlock of the Nostromo. The shuttle Narcissus by Ellen Ripley, who of course was played by Sigourney Weaver. And then it was later recovered from space while it was still believed to be dead and brought to Weyland-Yutani's Romulus research station for experimentation. So I just want to talk a little bit about how Romulus kind of came to be. So what happened here that was fairly significant in 2022 was the acquisition of 21st Century Fox by Walt Disney Company. So 20th Century Fox confirmed at the 2019 CinemaCon that future Alien films were being developed. And in March of 2022, it was reported that Fede Alvarez would write and direct a 7th Alien film after pitching his own story, said to be, quote, unconnected to the previous films in the franchise, with the project set to be released on Hulu. So then later, he backtracked and said it was not a standalone story. The film was said to take place between the events of Alien and Aliens, with some technical crew members returning from the latter film. The film Romulus features connections and references to all of the 6 prior Alien films. So that's Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection, Prometheus, and Alien Covenant. And also the Alien Isolation game, which I'll go into a little bit more too, in some capacity. So, in particular, the film ties directly to Alien and Prometheus, with Weyland Yutani recovering the xenomorph that had attacked Ellen in Alien from the Nostromo, and an android named Rook, who physically resembles Ash from the first film, as well as the black goo from Prometheus that gives birth to a human xenomorph hybrid resembling an engineer from Prometheus, and the creature from the ending of Resurrection. So Rook appears via an animatronic with the likeness of the late Ian Holm, who previously portrayed Ash. And I'm going to get into that later. People have a lot of feelings about that. Alvarez confirmed the connections to Prometheus and stated that the hybrid's resemblance to the engineers was intentional. This was done specifically to bridge the gap between the prequels and the original films. So, having said that, what I'd like to get into, before I go more in depth into the film itself, is I want to talk about how sequels, prequels, legacy sequels, all that kind of stuff, have sort of saturated Hollywood, specifically horror, film in general, and why. So, essentially, the slashers of the 80s, and then the meta-awareness of the 90s, and then you had the horror remake craze of the 2000s, and the found footage genre of the 2010s, kind of came and went fairly quickly. The latter half of the 2010s and early 2020s have really been defined by legacy sequels of many genres. You have, Top Gun Maverick, you have Star Wars The Force Awakens, and you have superhero films like, The Flash. So, but the horror genre really kind of tapped into this, I think in a more significant way, with David Gordon Green's Halloween trilogy. You also had 2022 Scream, and the one that followed that as well. You have 2022's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you also have The Exorcist Believer, which I'm also going to go into later. So I think it was originally embraced. I loved the 2018's Halloween. Anybody who knows me knows I love that one. And I think I embraced that because it featured characters that, first of all, we knew and we hadn't seen for a long time, and touches to the other Halloween films. Not too much, but enough. But what it did was it took Laurie's story in a very, I think, more interesting and complex way. And I can't believe I'm saying this about David Gordon Green, because man, I was wrong about this guy. But what they did that was interesting with that was that, first of all, this is, what they kind of are doing now, is that all the sequels have been erased. All of it's done. That doesn't count. So we're going directly from the original 78 film to now. Nothing has happened in between. So I think that was interesting for that film and at that time, because we feel the chunk of time that has passed, and we also feel through Laurie and her family the ramifications of those events and how they're still coming into play in present day. It examined, survivor trauma, alcoholism, and it did it in a way that I think made us connect with Laurie in kind of a new way. And where, she's a badass, she's a survivor, but this allowed her to be emotionally vulnerable, and to be sort of broken, and which I really enjoyed. I liked her vulnerability in that. So yeah. So I think that while we've kind of had initially, we're like, okay, yeah, we can do this, in terms of, having these kind of legacy sequels, it's become now this sort of fad or trick or, gimmick that is turning more and more audiences off. And I think right now, for me, I see horror and I see film in general. This is a horror podcast, and I talk primarily about horror films. But I feel like with this topic, it goes broader than that. And I feel like horror is kind of going through an identity crisis right now. And the creativity that is guiding its market is... I'm not going to say there's not good stuff coming out. There is. There's good original stuff coming out. But I think it's been so few and far between. And what happens now is that studios continue to pump out the same old legacy sequels, basically in an attempt to cover the demand. This is an issue with a lot of genres, but I feel like with horror, it's very much becoming clear. And like I said, while there's still, plenty of original horror films, what's happening is that the legacy sequels are crowding out the marketplace and essentially taking up all the oxygen. So, you have films like, granted, we had Long Legs this year, which, definitely exceeded expectations, but it was marketed well. And I think, very smartly for a film that's essentially considered to be more indie than maybe, some of the other stuff that's been released. Excuse me. So this causes studios to indulge in familiar intellectual properties, IPs, that will drive people to the theaters. And one notable example by Blumhouse, especially, that resulted in The Exorcist Believer after their Halloween experiment. So after the trilogy that brought Michael Myers back, eliminated everything after the 78 film, and finally ended the run with a lackluster conclusion, David Gordon Green was tasked with the follow-up to what many believe is an untouchable film, which was The Exorcist. And it was released in 2023. And what happens is that he's like, well, I'm just going to do beep, boop, beep, boop, boop. Same thing. It worked for Michael Myers. It'll work here. There was no reason to believe it wouldn't, because the numbers told him. So it put all the sequels aside and attempted to continue what William Friedkin had created in 1973. So the result basically was a modernized version of the same story that essentially lacked all the controversial drive and mystery of faith themes that the original had. It is a legacy sequel by all standards. And I'll talk some more about that. So, legacy sequels all tend to follow the exact same formula. They bring back a character from the original film who's haunted, affected by the threat that they had escaped years prior, was part of the events, what have you. That means that the final girl no longer gets to be the final girl, as they're basically drawn back into a conflict and denied any sense of a happy ending. Now, while this practice was done in the past with characters returning in horror sequels, like you have Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, Halloween H2O. This new batch of sequels is all about bringing back the original star to appeal to the fans. Now you can see this directly with the Scream franchise, which has worked. It has worked. And I think the fact that Scream already being a meta franchise, self-referential, has actually kind of helped it kind of skirt this issue for a long time. And, you know, now we have Neve Campbell coming back. Again, bring back the original star to appeal to the fans, because fans were pissed when she wasn't going to be coming back. So, this catering to a fan base also tends to mean many of these films tend to toss aside their continuity. So they do like a back to basics approach, saying all other less successful sequels did not happen, and instead this is the true sequel that they always deserved. Scream doesn't do that. It's basically still continuing the story. So I'm a little bit remiss to put this into, you know, this particular example that I'm using. Scream, I feel, is different. Scream is kind of like leaned into all of this, and they did it kind of from the jump, you know, of horror tropes. So yeah. But this kind of back to basics, saying like, for people who love sequels or who love a franchise, it's sort of like, oh, you're dumb, and oh, we're gonna make this better. You know, we're gonna make it better for you. You deserve better. And it's this kind of pandering notion that ignores the actual creative challenge of trying to wrestle with more complicated lore and mythology to make a satisfying film. You know, like you have Creed using Rocky IV as a launching point. And it just plays it safe. So now they get to ride the coattails of the beloved entry. And like I said, so far, really Scream is the only one that's kept its continuity, and it's been to a great success. I mean, arguably more than, you know, the other legacy series, which tend to toss aside all other entries. And this generic disposition has really led to a creative vacuum. You know, you had that Texas Chainsaw Massacre one that, you know, came out a couple of years ago, which did not do well. Halloween Ends left a lot of people very disappointed. And the new Hellraiser, while it had some moments, it really failed to impress many or make it really a decent amount of buzz, you know, with only a few relegated mentions in the overall movie viewing world. And I feel like one could argue that this problem goes hand in hand with the situations currently affecting Marvel Studios. Basically, after Endgame, it was Endgame for Marvel Studios. I will say that. Because they're trying to keep this cash machine going. That's what it is. It is a cash machine. And they want to keep it up, because, and they are struggling right now. They're struggling hard. Because you know what? If there's no stakes, then why are we interested? Because what's happened with Marvel is that, oh, well, let's just make a time loop or a time warp or whatever. It's not the Rocky Horror Picture Show. We're not we're not going to time warp. But I think you get the idea here is that they've sort of created these, like, you know, parallel universes and all that with the new Spider-Man and, you know, the Marvels and all this kind of stuff, so that basically, well, there's no stakes anymore because anybody can come back. And when there's no tension and there's no conflict in that, why are we paying attention? Why do we care? And right now, the current, buzz for these products is really hitting a new low. And there's very little enthusiasm from the general public after years of long lines and a monopoly on the zeitgeist. You have the repetitive plot lines and the quips that have grown out of interest. And aside again from Scream, the other horror legacy sequels, at the box office are failing with each entry. By every metric, these films are not as popular as they were 4 or 5 years ago. And while still making a profit, the chances are they will start diminishing in return sooner rather than later. So, just to give an example of this, okay? Last year, 15 out of the top 20 films grossing more than 130 or 150 million in the US and Canada were mostly sequels or based on existing IPs. So Barbie, existing IP, Super Mario Brothers, existing IP, Spider-Man Across the Universe, sequel, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, sequel, The Little Mermaid, sequel, remake, Avatar: The Way of Water, sequel, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, sequel, John Wick Chapter 4, sequel, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, sequel, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, sequel, The Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, sequel, Transformers: Rise of the Beasts, sequel, Creed 3, sequel, Fast X, sequel, Five Nights at Freddy's, existing IP, and Wonka, existing IP. There's a reason why Hollywood relies so heavily on sequels and prequels. It shows them the money. Out of the top 60 box office films since 2016, I'm excluding 2020 because most theaters were shut down, of course, due to the pandemic. Just 5 can be classified as true original titles, with sequels driving the bulk of the industry's highest grossing films. So there was an analysis from the box office analytics platform Intelligence, which highlights movie studios' predictable reliance on sequels, franchises, and known IP to boost ticket sales. Now, for them, according to them, adding to the production pressures, the top 10 films on average have represented about 1 out of every 3 tickets sold in a given year over the past decade. Essentially what that means is that the top films drive the business, which essentially forces Hollywood to bank on a, quote, tried and true content strategy, as opposed to taking a chance on an original concept that may not perform. So Travis Knox, who is a film producer and a professor at Chapman University, said, quote, "It's purely financial. The cost of marketing feature releases is enormous. And with Hollywood's target audience avoiding traditional ad-based television, it's harder to get the word out. Releasing a film that has familiarity is perceived as being a safer bet." He also added that studios have become accustomed to, quote, chasing that first week, saying, quote, "Movies now live or die from the first weekend. So doing a sequel or something that's already out there in the ether, whether it's a Marvel character or based on a hit book, is always going to make it a little bit easier to sell tickets from a studio perspective." I wanted to play a clip. This is a clip of Red Letter Media. If you don't know who they are on YouTube, I mean, they're fantastic. They reviewed Alien Romulus, and they sort of reference this mindset of the studios. And I'm just going to play a little clip of it now.
deep fakey home face on it, where the mouth feels like disconnected from the rest of the head.
Didn't look right.
Yeah.
And I was like,
just have it be a new character.
That movie is like 50 years old. Like, no one cares. I mean, people care about the movie, but the only people like certainly over 40 are going to go, oh, that's, Ash from the first Alien movie. Like, no one's going to care who's like under 30. No one's going to care at all. So why bother? Just make it a random android.
Right.
And who's in charge of the bio lab?
Get a new interesting actor to play that part. Maybe have an interesting performance from a new android character.
I just get that feeling like, and this is becoming a cliche at this point, where he plops the script down and the camera pans back and there's a boardroom of 30 people in business suits. And then they say, we need to maximize efficiency for this movie product. When it goes into theaters, it has to remind people of this movie and this movie and this movie and this movie. Our charts and our analytics and biometric data shows that if people remember that, they'll recommend it to a friend because it had the scene in it from Alien where she climbs down a ladder and you see her close-up of her Reebok shoes. Mm-hmm. And then she's trying to hit the button of an elevator while the creature's coming. They'll remember that scene from Alien, and our psychiatric division says that they will recommend, you got to put that in. She's got to be in. She didn't have like as revealing of underwear as Sigourney Weaver did.
No.
We have to blur that out for YouTube. It's so revealing, but she just had like little sleeping shorts on, and so it's like that's that scene. Mm-hmm. The character is in her most vulnerable. That's what works so much about that. She's like barely wearing any clothes.
She's caught off guard and she thinks it's over.
Ready to get in bed. She's got her butt crack panties showing, and then she realizes there's an alien just kind of like curled up in the wall like a bug.
It's like dead silence.
Yeah, and it's oh fuck. Yeah. Slips into the spacesuit. So we got to have that scene.
Yeah.
Because that's iconic. And then just Fede Alvarez going, how much are you going to pay me? I'll do it. And that's like, it's all gross.
Yeah. And then I wonder about Ridley Scott too, because he produced this, and I wonder if that was like his idea to incorporate the Prometheus like mutation shit and bring back the engineer. Like, was that his contribution? And it's like one of like 15 voices,
like an ego thing,
giving notes. Yeah.
I mean, we could be totally wrong, and this could be a 100%. Fede Alvarez screenplay. 100%.
I just wanted to pay homage to the entire franchise.
We could be wrong.
Yeah.
But our cynical nature takes over, and our cynical nature is probably correct.
So let's look at Romulus. And I want to look at Romulus as a prime example of what's called nostalgia baiting. Not the other kind of baiting. Nostalgia baiting. So what is nostalgia baiting? Well, nostalgia bait is essentially a marketing strategy that uses positive feelings associated with the past to sell a product or media. It can involve references to pop culture. You think of something like Deadpool and Wolverine, fashion, or historical periods to trigger those feelings. And the goal is to make people think that the product is as good as the original, even if it's not. We also have things that I think were kind of coined by South Park years ago, rememberberries, which is basically like, remember when she shot the alien out of the airlock? Remember how cool that was? It's basically like getting self-reassurance out of just remembering things that you liked. I'm gonna go into all of this a little bit more, but let's talk about Alien Romulus. Let's talk about the story of Romulus. So we have a Weyland-Yutani space probe investigating the wreckage of the Nostromo, collecting an organic object containing a xenomorph. So we then meet Rain Carradine, who's an orphan, who works with her adoptive brother, Andy, who is a reprogrammed synthetic human at the colony Jackson's Star. After her contract is forcibly extended by Weyland-Yutani, she's agreed to join her ex-boyfriend Tyler to a derelict spacecraft to retrieve cryostasis chambers. And these chambers will allow Rain and her friends, Tyler, his pregnant sister Kay, cousin Bjorn, and Bjorn's girlfriend Navarro, to escape to the planet Yavaga. Now, Andy's ability to interface with the onboard computer system is crucial for the mission. Rain is hesitant to send Andy, but is convinced by Tyler and Andy to allow him to assist. So they fly the hauler Corbelan to the spacecraft, which is revealed to be a station divided into two parts, Romulus and Remus, a reference to the Roman legend of Romulus and Remus. While retrieving stasis chambers, Tyler, Bjorn, and Andy accidentally revive frozen facehuggers and trigger a lockdown. To override the lockdown, Rain installs a chip from a damaged android Rook into Andy, granting him access to the station while also updating his thought processing and general efficiency. Unbeknownst to the others, this also changes his prime directive, which was Rain, but now it's Weyland-Yutani. So now he is loyal solely to them, to the company. As the group flees the chamber, a facehugger latches onto Navarro. Rain reactivates Rook, who discloses that the station's crew was killed by the xenomorph and its clones. While Tyler tries to remove the creature, Rook warns it may have implanted a seed. Despite Andy's attempts to stop him, Bjorn flees with Navarro on the Corbelan. A chestburster emerges from Navarro, killing her. The Corbelan with Kay and Bjorn aboard crashes into the Romulus hangar, jeopardizing the station's orbit and leaving less than an hour before it collides with Jackson's planetary rings. Kay is knocked unconscious from the impact, and the chestburster escapes into the ship. She regains consciousness and runs into Bjorn, who discovers and attacks the xenomorph, gestating into its adult form before dying from its acid blood. Rain and Tyler navigate the bay while avoiding the facehuggers. Kay escapes the Corbelan, but is stalked by a xenomorph trying to lure the others into a trap. Andy refuses to unlock the door so as to not put everyone at risk, and they watch helplessly as Kay is attacked and dragged away. Andy finds samples of a compound scientists had extracted from the xenomorphs, which Rook calls the Prometheus fire, intended to perfect humans. Rook insists the samples must be brought to the colony and prevents the Corbelan from leaving without them. Rain and Tyler rescue Kay from a cocoon, but Tyler is killed and Andy is incapacitated. Badly injured, Kay injects herself with the compound during their escape. Rain returns to the Romulus, helps Andy by removing the control chip, thus returning his loyalty to Rain, and disables the ship's gravity in order to shoot the xenomorphs while keeping their blood away from the hull. They make it back to the Corbelan just before the station crashes into the rings, destroying Rook. As Rain and Andy prepare for their trip, Kay, affected by the compound injection, gives birth to a rapidly growing human xenomorph hybrid. The hybrid kills Kay and injures Andy, but Rain manages to eject the creature into Jackson's rings. She places Andy in a chamber and records a log about their hoped-for arrival at Yavaga before entering stasis herself. So that's essentially the plot of Romulus. And so Romulus, like I said, it has a lot of connections. It has connections to all the Alien films. Particularly Alien and Prometheus / Covenant. So basically, that connection, when Rook explains that the scientists on board the Romulus had extracted the mysterious black goo material from Big Chap that Prometheus and Covenant had introduced into the series lore. The exact nature of the substance has never been fully explained, but it basically functions as an incredibly aggressive mutanogen that holds the power to create and destroy life forms. In Covenant, we learned that the android David was using the black goo to reverse engineer the DNA of the xenomorphs. According to Rook, the Romulus scientists were attempting to turn the black goo into sort of a miracle cure of sorts that could upgrade humans and naturally create better workers for Weyland-Yutani because, you know, people were dying fairly young from lack of sunlight and the working conditions there. So, of course, things went very, very wrong when Big Chap turned out to still be alive, massacred the crew, laid facehugger eggs in the ship, and created a hive of xenomorphs. The so-called cure also doesn't work as it's supposedly intended to, as is evidenced by the really grotesque and horrible xenomorph human hybrid that comes out of Kay after she injects herself to try and heal her xenomorph injuries. And yeah, so I want to go into this film a little bit and sort of my thoughts. I don't really have so much, particular notes about it as to what I've kind of observed and felt during this film. Now, here's what I'm going to say that I enjoyed about it. I feel like a lot of people are like, well, it takes a lot of cues from Alien and Prometheus. And yeah, that's true. I think a lot of stuff is from that. They've put touches and nods to all of the films in this. But I'm also going to put into that grouping the Alien Isolation video game, which I've only kind of recently discovered. I have not played it myself yet. But I watched a very long YouTuber she's great. She streamed herself playing the game on nightmare mode, which is basically, that's the hardest mode there is in the game. And I watched all of it. It's several hours long, but there are touches for sure to that film in this. I think more in terms of the look of the ships, Romulus and Remus, the environments, it looks much more like Isolation than I think even the original Alien or Aliens. So I feel like the look and the visuals of it were really kind of more informed by Isolation, which I'm not mad at. The film looks great. And a lot of the effects are very effective. I mean, effective, they should be. Everybody was talking about, practical. Practical effects are great. I'm a fan of practical effects. But when you have a story that is not good, then I really don't care how the fucking movie looks, because the story is letting me the fuck down. And here's why. This film is an exact example of what is going wrong with legacy sequels. Because what it does is that it takes nostalgia baiting, rememberberries, and it puts it all into one film. You have clips of dialogue. You have dialogue that's the same as some of the original movies. Oh, remember that? Remember when she says, "Get away from her, you bitch"? Well, guess what? That's in this film. Does that feel good? Does that do something for you? You also have the structure which is basically like every other Alien movie structure. Hey, we're gonna have a group of these people go to this place, which they probably shouldn't be, and mess with something that they shouldn't. That's basically it. And what kind of blows me away too is that Fede Alvarez already did this movie. It's called Don't Breathe. Because essentially the basics of it are the same. You have a group of young kids who are like, we want to get out of this town. I mean, yeah, it's true. They want to get out of this town. So they're like, we're going to go steal something from this place that will help us get out of here and have a better life, hopefully. But they walk essentially into the wrong fucking house, as we know from that film. That's not a bad film. I enjoyed that film. But I'm also like, why are we kind of retreading material here, Fede? You know, it's like, you've done this before. And did it well. So, one problem that I have is that essentially we have the structure is the same. I'm not expecting anything different. And the beginning was fairly promising. I liked that we saw this kind of this planet that was under the Weyland-Yutani control, and how the lives of those people worked like every day. And I feel like the first 30 minutes I was like, all right, you know, this is not wholly original in the Aliens canon, but it's not bad. It's working. But then they had to go for the nostalgia baiting. They had to go for the rememberberries, and the biggest one of all being the return of Ash. One reason why I didn't like it, I first of all, if it had been a brief scene with Ash, you know, just sort of like he drops some knowledge, some back information for them, and they bounce. Okay. I still wouldn't have been terribly happy with it, only because honestly, I just for me personally, it feels distasteful basically bringing this man back from the dead, and poorly at that. I'm hoping that he or his family had signed off on people being able to do that, because if not, then that's kind of fucking crappy. But not only did they not make this a brief cameo, they made him a big part of the story. And it wasn't necessary. They didn't need to do that. And I feel like it would have been fine just it being a random other, you know, AI robot. Somebody else. It didn't look like Rook. It didn't need to happen. It didn't need to happen. And I felt the hand of the studio that made this thing on the back of my head saying, see, remember this. And I was not happy. This film, more than any other film that I think that I've seen to date, I felt gross after seeing this film. I felt like I had walked right into a big money-grabbing trap. I really did. Those are my honest feelings. I was just very disappointed. I was very disappointed. Because this whole thing felt like It felt like things that had already been done and done better shoved all into one film and no creativity. Honestly, really no creativity. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just the hybrid, the human hybrid thing, it was just sort of like, as the film sort of crescendoed, it just was like, throw more at it, will more make it better? And that's really kind of what it felt like. It was just rehash after rehash after rehash. And I felt the slimy hand of Hollywood all over this film. Now, as of now, the film holds an 80% Rotten Tomatoes rating and a 64 Metacritic score. And overall, reviews of it are actually pretty divided. And I'm actually going to play a clip of Mark Commode's own review of it.
And there are a couple of neat new ideas that we haven't seen really done before in the series. One of them, which we have dealt with some extent, is the problem of how do you kill an alien that's got acid for blood? That if you kill it, the acid will drip through the outside of the spacecraft and kill everybody. So they do an interesting thing with that. They've also got, there's quite a lot of business about turning the gravity on and turning the gravity off, and that works quite well as a device. And there is a sequence which is very don't breathy about when they figuring out that how it is that the face huggers can detect humans, and there's a way of kind of, they can't detect us if the following thing is true. Okay, so all those are plus points. On the downside, it doesn't make any sense, although, how much of an issue that is. I mean, particularly the stuff at the beginning about the retrieval of the bits of, blown up space. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense at all, but that's fine. Secondly, the decision to revive a key character through the miracle of digital effects simply proves that digital effects haven't yet figured out how to do mouths properly. And it's particularly bothersome since in the particular case of the revived character, they could just have done a melted, messed up mask and it would have been fine. I mean, it's one of those effects that weirdly enough, you probably just should have just done a William Shatner mask, but and it's so distracting. It's so distracting. Also, with the exception of the anti-gravity stuff and the I suppose to some extent the acid blood thing, this is very much a compendium of familiar riffs. So at one point, a character says very self-referentially, "Get away from her, you B word." There's a callback to the famous scene of Ripley slipping into the spacesuit at the end of Alien. There's a kind of callback to the thing from Aliens in which Ripley is shown how to use the whammo blaster, and then in the final half hour of the film, maybe the final 20 minutes, but when the film goes completely mad, I mean, the last half an hour, it goes completely nuts. And you get a cross between the weirdest scene from Alien Resurrection and the silliest scene from Prometheus. And there's also a kind of strange thing. You remember in Alien 3, it's a bunch of Brit actors who all swear a lot, and you can't really, and then they get picked off by the alien. I mean, in the case of this, the characters you care about most often aren't the humans. So there is a sense of kind of shut up and play the hits, and it doesn't make any sense. But I was never bored. There is some fun stuff in there. It is tense at times because the director knows how to do tension. There is some very likable monster goo. And unlike some of the other, Alien movies, we don't have to put up with a bunch of fatuous myth-building nonsense in which, Michael Fassbender discusses the meaning of life, or there's a droning thing about the stupid idea of cosmic engineers, which I never understood why Ridley Scott became enamored of that stuff, because it was... So, it's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad.
I wanted to also play another review, a brief clip. The Nerdrotic reviewer on YouTube who had a distinctly more negative take on the film.
The first of the only 2 Alien films floating in the void of deep space near pieces of the Nostromo that weren't atomized by a nuclear explosion. And yes, they really wanted you to know it was that xenomorph.
I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
This is where there might be some unintentional meta-commentary because this movie extracts the goo from the only 2 Alien films and mutates and dilutes the rest of the franchise, leaving the door open for more interquels like Alien 1.25 or Alien 1.75. One of the best descriptions I've heard comes from our good friend Robert Meyer Burnett. Remember, authenticity is the currency of the future. When he said, and I'll paraphrase, Alien as a franchise is that band that you love that's decades past its prime, allowing a bunch of mid-level bands to do a poorly produced tribute album of their greatest hits. And yes, the same could be said for all of Hollywood right now. So you can get the aesthetics right all day long, but without any meaning to your story or characters, it's just another piece of soulless content. And on that, at the very least, questionable return of characters played by dead actors. Remember that strike from last year when the Film Actors Guild said the AI boogeyman was going to take all their jobs, when in truth it was about the control of AI, and now all the adult pretenders are rushing out to sign off their likenesses. And it won't be long until we get a movie with new music by Prince and David Bowie, directed by Stanley Kubrick, starring John Wayne, Humphrey Bogart, Clark Gable, John Belushi, Robin Williams, and Marilyn Monroe fighting xenomorphs. To be honest, I'd watch the hell out of that. Ultimately, Alien Romulus is a forgettable drop in the ocean of creative bankruptcy.
So, what are some films that work as legacy sequels? Because I realize that, it's not everything. Some films work. You have films like The Exorcist 3, which is excellent, and took it in a new, was able to bring things back and bring people back. But it took the story in a whole different level, a different way. You have like the John Wick series, which is like, those are fun. You don't have to think a lot in the John Wick ones. Excuse me. But then, you see so many films that are just all about references. And you look at a film like, I was listening to a podcast the other day about the movie Airplane, which I love. And you look at a film like Airplane, and then you look at something like Not Another Teen Movie. And whereas Airplane has these kind of timeless references, and there's some pointed ones too, like the coffee lady who's like, John never has another cup at home, or something like that. And actually, she was actually the lady in the commercial that was parroting, which is, I had no idea. My mind was blown. And then you look at something like Scary Movie 3 or Not Another Teen Movie or whatever, and it feels, watching them now, like I can watch Airplane now and it's still so funny. And it's still like, you get it. You get the humor, and it just is like, still feels not current, but it's still funny. And when you look at something like, the Scary Movie 3 or, like I said, Not Another Teen Movie or whatever, those just, when you watch them now, it feels so dated and so out of touch, even just a few years after. Because now you have generations who are like, I don't know who Paris Hilton is and why is she in this? And, so it feels like the shelf life for movies like this are shorter than ones that are maybe a little bit more subtler and sparing with such overt references. You watch Airplane and it's like, well, I don't know who Robert Stack is, we know, my generation knows, we of the unsolved mysteries generation, but they're just actors, to kids. And so they have no idea. But like I said, these movies that are just all about referencing things and remember-burying things, the shelf life for them is so much shorter. And, you look at a movie like Malignant, which I know is kind of a strange reference, but it has so many little wonderful touches and nods to various horror films that are not overt. It's not in your face, but it's like enough as a horror fan that you see it and you're just like, oh man, you know, it feels right. And it's just like, oh my gosh, you know. And so we have right now, and I'm going to go back to Exorcist Believer. We have a lack of refinement in modern legacy writing and a misuse of legacy characters. And that is an example with this film and also with something like Exorcist Believer, who, you know, you have something, an original conceit, and have taken all of kind of the depth out of it. And it's like, well, the first one has one girl who's possessed. We're going to have two. Bigger, better, bam. And guess what? We're going to bring back Ellen Burstyn. How about that? We're going to give her horrible lines to say. And we're going to do an exorcism. But it's going to be an exorcism with more people. And the gall of Hollywood to basically shove recycled crap in our faces and be like, here, you're gonna take it, you're gonna go see it, you got to, because it's one of your favorite films, you have to go see it. And that's what I have an issue with. And that's what I have an issue with these kinds of films that consistently are about the bottom line, are about the opening weekend, and what can we do as little as possible to get as much of this out, as much money out of this as we can. Creativity? Fuck that. No. We can't count on creativity. Creativity and originality, that's a big gamble. That's a huge gamble. And we're in the business of making money. So, what can we do to make better sequels? Or better legacy sequels? So, one thing that I do want to talk about in terms of that is looking at the Planet of the Apes reboot. I love these films. And I think they are done extremely well. I've seen the originals as well. Original Planet of the Apes and also Beneath the Planet of the Apes. So I get the references, because there are references. And I'm not saying that references are a bad thing to do. They help to connect with us, with our nostalgia about these films, especially if they're dear to our heart. And I get that, and I understand it, and I like feeling that way too. But it's like using salt. You know, it's like, yeah, you want to get it just right, otherwise it's ruined. You put too much in it and you just ruin the dish. But what Planet of the Apes has done is that they're like, we're going to take good performances. We're going to take a good story. We're going to take good effects, well-rounded characters, well-rounded villains, and be as loving with the material as possible. And I think if there's any franchise that has done this successfully, it is the Planet of the Apes one. They are gorgeous to look at. The effects are fantastic. The performances are amazing. And really, it's the performances of the apes, actually. And then you also have these amazing and complex stories and themes that are in these that are fascinating and are difficult to, you can see both sides of it. And so I don't know why this franchise in particular I feel like it's kind of slept on, but they are doing this right. Of course they have missteps here and there in the films where it sort of starts to go a little towards, nostalgia baiting with some stuff. But I feel like overall they really treat these this reboot and these films with a lot of care and attention to detail, realizing people, they're fans of the originals, but it doesn't feel like everything coming at you is like a reference or is something that we've seen before. And I think I have an idea for the next, if Alien is going to do another film, and they probably will, it makes some money, but my idea is actually to use the video game Isolation as a jumping off point. So what I would personally like to see from the next Alien film, I don't want a whole crew, because every single movie without fail, it's a crew of people. What I would like is really one person. Now, I'm not saying it has to be Ripley's daughter like in the video game. Actually, I kind of don't want that. But almost like one person who has maybe been separated or is for some reason on this ship or on this planet alone, or and maybe they can only talk to their crew or whatever other person through video or what have you, or on a call box or something like that. But essentially it being like a mano kind of sequel where you basically have this person trying to get from this A to B and are constantly having to hide, navigate, find their way around these xenomorphs just on their own. I feel like a tighter focus with the Alien films is needed. Now, I mean, these are pretty tightly focused. It's usually like a time period. It's short. It's contained. But I want to strip away so much of what we've seen with Alien, because we don't need to keep repeating it. We have the originals. They're good. And we go back and watch them and they're still good. So why do we want to see the things from those films coming into each and every film? It's just overkill. And we don't need it. What we need are original ideas within this universe. And it's possible. We can do it. I want to share this quote that I will attribute to, hopefully, I don't know if you follow him on Instagram or what have you, but his name is Rich Harris. He runs the Slash in the Attic Instagram account. And there was something that he had quoted to me. We were talking about this film, and I wanted to remember it. I took a screenshot of it because I wanted to remember it. But it's essentially what he said is that, quote, "If you can stop yourself from being manipulated into thinking you're having a great time simply because the character said the thing or because you saw the thing from the other thing, you'll probably realize that all you're watching is someone with a lot less talent than the director of your favorite movie take you through the photo album in your mind." And I love that, because that's essentially what these studios are doing. we're not creating new memories with film or with all of these legacy sequels and prequels. We're not creating new memories. What they're doing is they're keeping us in the past. They're making us go through that nostalgic photo album in our mind as a sort of sedative, as a soothing balm. See, remember this? Remember how great that was? And you know what that does is that in the moment, maybe it feels good, but it keeps you in the past. And with art and the art of film, it's about storytelling in new and interesting ways. There's always new stories to tell, new ways to do it. Creativity is not dead. I believe that with my whole heart. And leaving that theater after watching Romulus, it really struck me that now more than ever, we need creative stories. We need original stories, original horror, original films. We need writing. We need passion. And we need to be aware of where, when we go to the box office and we buy these tickets, and I bought a ticket. I'm guilty. Hell, I admit it. I'm guilty of doing it too. We think about what we're supporting and this perpetuating cycle that's allowed to continue. Now, sequels can be great. Like I said, they're not all bad. But original movies have really taken a backseat in these last couple of years. And it's become more and more and more, what can we make the most money off of? And it's the thing that's easy. It's fast food filmmaking is what it is. It's easy, it tastes good, it's cheap, but you know what it does? Makes you gain weight, makes you lazy. And I feel like watching this film, I've had a strangely cathartic experience in realizing that, and realizing that, wow, I really was just a part of something going and seeing that film that was all about just making money off of me and my nostalgia for these films. And that's really all that it was. And yeah, I think we can do better. I think we all want to do better. I don't think we want to be pandered to. I think that nostalgia in small doses is good. It's good to feel those things and to remember those things because they have good memories associated with them. But again, it becomes, when are we enjoying the flourish, that brush flourish of nostalgia? And when does it become just dumping onto you? Like, here, take it. And I think I hope to see, and I hope to continue to support more original movie ideas. I think we're all weary of sequels. I think we're very weary of it at this point. And so I'm hoping that we see a tide begin to kind of turn with these films. So you may agree with me, you may not, and that's okay. This was me just kind of saying my piece about the matter, and that's it. So that's it for this week, you guys. Thank you so much for listening. As always, you can find me on Letterboxd, Twitter, and Threads at Dead Alive Dana. And if you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes or movies for me to talk about, you can email me at deadalivedana@gmail.com. And until next time, monsters, stay safe, and most importantly, No one can hear you scream in space.